Tonight on Second Take, the law speaks, power responds, and politics adapts. Julius Malema walks out of court with 5 years behind him and possibly more political capital ahead. In Gabon, a late-night knock turns a small debt into a loud signal. In Malawi, calm becomes strategy as scandal unfolds. In Cameroon, the pulpit briefly interrupts political authority. Yes, we're talking about the Pope. And in Nigeria, 2027 quietly begins very loudly. This is not just what happened. This is what it means. This is Second Take. Court in East London was never going to be quiet the day Julius Malema walked in. This wasn't just a sentencing. It was attendance, political, ideological, almost ceremonial. Supporters outside cameras fixed, opposition voices waiting to interpret, not just report. In South Africa, when Malema arrives at court, the law shares the stage with theatre. Inside, Magistrate Toinette Olivier was not interested in theatre. The judgment was deliberate, almost stubbornly calm in the face of a moment that carried national weight. 5 years for unlawful possession of a firearm, 2 years for ammunition neatly folded into concurrency. Fines stacked onto the remaining counts like administrative reminders that this was not just one mistake but a sequence. And then the line that matters in a country shaped by violence. A leader must know better. Outside, of course, knowing better is negotiable, especially when the microphones are louder than the verdict.
We can tell you now, no sober judge will ever agree that a person shoot one bullet and then is sentenced for 5 years. It is because she has not read her own judgment to know that a reasonable, normal, presiding officer will never come to that determination. So, comrades, we are done with her. That's why when she said to me, you can leave now on a free bail, I looked at her and I said, bye-bye. Because I've seen her ugly face for too long. So I'm going, I will no longer appear before that ugly white face. I'm going to the highest court where they don't use emotions, they use the law. What does the law say? And apply the law. So we must not even look back, we're going forward. The campaigns of the EFF must continue business as usual. I told you when she found me guilty that I'm going to appeal until the highest court, until the constitutional court. So those who thought they will have me in jail, you must know I'm still around.
Because the same man the court has now convicted is the same man who walked into a stadium in 2018 and fired into the air before thousands. Not in panic, not in confusion, but in performance. At the time, it read like spectacle, the kind that defines Malema's politics: loud, intentional, unapologetic. The court has now reclassified that moment from spectacle to offense, from symbolism to liability. A rare moment where performance received a legal review.
I'm not going anywhere. I told you yesterday that tomorrow I'm going home with you. And that's what is happening. Wherever the enemy is, it's highly pained by the fact that we are going home. We did not even have to pay for a bail. They just said, free bail, go home. So we are going home to work for the EFF. That's what home means. It means the work of the EFF continues. We are going to do our door-to-door. We are going to register those who are not registered. We are going to make sure that we win municipalities when the elections come. They are trying by all means to silence this voice. They will never win. Once more, they failed today, they will fail tomorrow, and they will fail in the near future. The sooner they accept defeat, the better. They will never win against us. They tried us when we're still young, and they will never win with us when we're this old. We've got an experience of a 65-year-old at a 45-year-old.
And yet, here's where things get interesting. The conviction stands. The sentence, however, enters South Africa's favorite political holding pattern, the appeal. Granted, not rushed, likely stretched over years, long enough for elections, reshuffles, and narratives to evolve. In other words, long enough for Malema to remain exactly where he is most effective, present. So what does 5 years mean if it doesn't begin? It means Malema leaves court not diminished, but reframed. To his critics, the ruling is overdue accountability, proof that the system, however slow, eventually asserts itself. To his supporters, it confirms something else entirely, that proximity to power without control of it comes with consequences, that certain voices are tolerated until they become too effective. Both readings will live side by side. Neither will cancel the other, and Malema, as always, will work in that tension.
And this magistrate must be reported to the commission. Why? How did the prosecutor know about the judgment? Because you are the only one who knows the judgment. Only you, the magistrate, could have told the prosecutor about the judgment. And to tell the prosecutor about the judgment outside the representatives of the accused, it's wrong. It's not allowed in law. If there is anything you want to communicate to the prosecutor, you must call the defense to come and you communicate in front of a defense. So clearly, you've got a special relationship with a prosecutor as a magistrate, and that is a misconduct on its own. So we must make sure that we pursue her for being ill-disciplined and abusing her power as a magistrate. So we are going to appeal this matter. We are going to make sure we go to Grahamstown and we are going to dismiss a judgment which was poorly read and which was poorly written. She has granted us leave for appeal on sentencing and refused to give us leave to appeal on conviction. We must petition the High Court to appeal the guilt verdict and the sentencing itself. Today, because all they wanted was to have me sleep here for one night, but they didn't know the reason why the Deputy President is not here. He is at Grahamstown. Because when you apply for leave to appeal and they refuse it, you have to apply for bail. She has a right to refuse it. Then you must petition the High Court to apply for bail at the High Court. So we've got the Deputy President in Grahamstown with papers ready, so that when she says you are not getting bail, you are going to sleep here, the Deputy President immediately files the papers at the High Court and make an agent application. We are not small children. We prepare for any eventuality. If she goes this way, we go the other way. If she goes this way, we go the other way. Because we know that we are dealing with an invisible hand, and therefore you have to be prepared at all material times. The judge at Grahamstown was ready and waiting to listen to our case at 3 o'clock, because we had already told the clerk of the court that we are coming. Not only that, we had a chopper waiting at the airport for the legal team to fly immediately to Grahamstown. We are fighting the devil, and we must fight with everything. 2 minutes they must see you here, 2 minutes they must see you on the other side. That is the power of the EFF. We prepare from all the fronts because we are fighting the enemy, and the enemy is white supremacists.
Because politically, this is not a retreat. It is material, the kind that sharpens messaging, the kind that simplifies the story. A leader versus the system is always easier to communicate than a leader within it. The court may have been speaking law, but politics is already translating it into narrative. The economic freedom fighters do not need to invent a storyline. It has arrived fully formed. Their leader, convicted but not contained, accountable but still active, threatened but not removed. In a political landscape that often rewards endurance over innocence, that combination is not a weakness. It is positioning. Of course, there is a ceiling to this. If the appeal fails, the consequences are not abstract. Loss of a parliamentary seat for Malema, disqualification from public office, like the slow machinery of law eventually arriving at a hard stop. That is the risk. But risk in Malema's political career has rarely been something to avoid. It has been something to use. And so the question is not whether the court has spoken. It has. The question is whether this moment reduces Malema or refines him. Because in South African politics, 5 years can end a career or build one. Sometimes the sentence is just the beginning of the campaign. In Libreville, Gabon, power didn't issue a statement. It knocked late at night, quietly, efficiently. Alain Claude Bilie-By-Nze was taken from his home by agents of the state. No rally, no crowd, no spectacle, just the kind of silence that tends to follow authority when it no longer feels the need to explain itself. The charge itself feels almost modest. A 2008 Festival of Culture's debt, 5 million CFA francs, about $9,000, the kind of figure that in another context might be settled with paperwork and a polite reminder. But context in post-coup Gabon is doing all the heavy lifting, because this is not just a former official. This is a man who stood in the 2025 election against Brice Oligui Nguema. This is a man who has, in recent months, found his voice again, questioning governance, pointing at reforms that seem to arrive by decree rather than debate. In short, this is a man who remembered he used to be relevant. And in systems still stabilizing after a coup, relevance can be a dangerous habit, especially when the system prefers quiet alumni. Officially, this is accountability, a state revisiting past financial conduct, cleaning up, tidying the books, but timing, as always, has its own commentary. Because when a 2008 issue becomes urgent in 2026, it raises less legal curiosity and more political interest. Why now? Why him? Why this file? Bilie-By-Nze's party calls it arbitrary and political. The state does not need to argue. The arrest speaks. It tells critics that history is available. It reminds insiders that distance from power is not distance from consequence. And it signals that the post-coup order is no longer in transition. It is settling. Under Brice Oligui Nguema, Gabon has moved from promise to some form of structure. The election was held, the majority was secured. Reform continues, but alongside it, a quieter system is taking shape. One where opposition is allowed, but not necessarily encouraged. No chaos, no mass crackdowns, just precision. One figure at a time, one file at a time. Because power, when confident, does not need noise. It just needs timing. And occasionally, a well-timed reminder that old files never really retire. In Lilongwe, Malawi, the scandal is loud. The response is not. Simplex Banda stands at the center of a serious case. Allegations of abuse of office, money laundering, a fertilizer for soya deal that reportedly left a gap of billions, the kind of numbers that usually demand outrage or denial. Instead, he offers composure. Arrested, processed, then released on bail, Banda steps into public view not as a man cornered, but as a man reflecting. His words are measured. Faith, patience, no bitterness. The police, he says, were doing their job. The moment was instructive. It is a curious strategy. In a political environment where volume substitutes for strength, Banda has chosen restraint. No attacks, no conspiracies, no attempt to discredit the system. And that in itself is political, or at the very least, inconvenient for a media cycle that prefers noise. Because calm, when deliberate, creates contrast. It allows the accused to appear steady while the system appears heavy. It invites interpretation. The allegations are serious. The barter arrangement that allegedly failed. A loss of billions in Kwacha, a test of institutional credibility, and yet Banda does not dismantle it publicly. He positions himself within it. A man in process, a leader being tested, a figure choosing dignity over drama. Not an admission, not a defense, a posture. As a leader of opposition in Malawi, he understands this moment is reputational. If the system is fair, his cooperation builds credibility. If excessive, his restraint builds sympathy. Either way, the tone works. Where Malema confronts, Banda absorbs. Both are strategy. In Malawi, where fatigue meets economic pressure, calm travels further than noise. The case will unfold, evidence will be tested, but the narrative is already forming. Not by what Banda says, but by what he doesn't. A silence that, in politics, is actually rarely empty. In Cameroon, specifically Bamenda, the crowd gathered for something rare. Not a rally, not a protest, not a political speech, a moral intervention. Pope Leo XIV arrived in a region defined by tension, and for a moment the guns paused. A temporary ceasefire, not negotiated through policy, but through presence. It is one of the more unusual features of power in Africa, that sometimes the only figure who can quiet conflict is one who holds no office in the state. A reminder that in Cameroon, authority wears many uniforms, but occasionally none of them are political. His message was not subtle. Africa's resources continue to be exploited. That's what the Pope said. The world spends more on weapons than on people. Ordinary lives are caught in systems far larger than them. It is the kind of critique politicians circle carefully. The Pope walked straight through it. Then the local landed. Corruption, governance, reconciliation, the Anglophone crisis in Cameroon. A sermon that sounded less like Sunday and more like an audit. This was not just diplomacy, it was direct. The state did not interrupt, it welcomed, hosted, secured, because even political power understands its limits when it's faced with global moral authority. Are you hearing us, Trump? Archbishop Andrew Nkea grounded it in local pain. Have a look.
For the past 8 years, many of our people have suffered a lot from a situation they did not create. Thousands are either internally displaced or escaped as refugees. Businesses were shut down, and for about 4 years, our children were not allowed to go to school. Children were used as a political bait. Many priests, religious, and bishops of this province have either been harassed, beaten, kidnapped, or even killed in this conflict. Yet, the church continues to carry the gospel as the light of hope among a traumatized people. Many women have been rendered widows, children orphaned, and many people rendered homeless by this crisis. Most Holy Father, today that your feet are standing on the soil of Bamenda, that has drunk the blood of many of our children, we in Bamenda can address ourselves in the messianic words of the prophet Isaiah. A people that walked in darkness has seen a great light. On those who live in the land of deep shadow, a light has shone. You have made their gladness greater. You have made their joy increase. They rejoice in your presence as men rejoice at the harvest time, as men are happy when they are dividing the spoils. We are happy because in this time of crisis, we see you as a messenger of peace. We see you as an ambassador of reconciliation. We see you as a promoter of justice. We see in you the presence of God Himself among us, who has come to visit His people like the dawn from on high. Even if the Holy Father says nothing today, His presence is a consoling presence. His blessings bring peace, and His words come like anointing on the wounds of those who are bleeding. With your presence here, Holy Father, I can confidently say, now is the time for peace.
Because a sermon does not rewrite policy, but it shifts conversation. It reminds leaders they are being watched beyond voters. It creates a pause. Whether that pause becomes change is another matter, because power listens, nods, and then files the feedback for later. Here are the Pope's words.
Your witness, your work for peace can be a model for the whole world. Jesus told us, blessed are the peacemakers. But woe to those who manipulate religion in the very name of God for their own military, economic, or political gain, dragging that which is sacred into darkness and filth. Yes, my dear sisters and brothers, you who hunger and thirst for justice, who are poor, merciful, meek, and pure of heart, you who have wept, you are the light of the world.
In Abuja, Nigeria, the next election has already begun, not officially, but politically. Bola Ahmed Tinubu steps forward not to campaign, but to signal, declaring readiness for 2027. He frames the election as mission. Poverty must be broken. Ignorance confronted. Democracy must survive, he says. It moves the conversation from present discomfort to future promise, where politicians like it. But the dismissal sharpens it. The African Democratic Congress convention was reduced to noise, a street convention, not a threat, just background sound. A classic move. Define your opponent early. Shrink their space before they fill it. Except the room was already filling. Atiku Abubakar, Ralph Aregebesola, David Mark, they are all positioning, testing language, building something. Because in Nigeria, opposition wins through alignment. And in alignment, getting real alignment takes time. Tinubu's declaration projects confidence, but also awareness. You don't dismiss what you haven't noticed. The ADC may not be unified, but it is active. So the question becomes, who defines the narrative first? Tinubu owns the future, frames criticism as distraction, moves forward. The opposition must turn dissatisfaction into structure. Decide if there are many voices or one. Nigerian politics has seen this before. Strong figures arriving separately. Meanwhile, the ruling party needs coherence. And in a fragmented field, that is enough. So 2027 is forming. In speeches, in dismissals. The campaigns have not started, but the politics already has, quietly, publicly, and with everyone insisting this is not campaigning yet. Here was Bola Tinubu talking about the ADC.
To various comments, I'm inspired, I'm ready. This is an opportunity of lifetime to break the shackle of poverty, ignorance, to put freedom in the hearts of our people, to ensure democracy survives. Not the noise making, not the rascality of a street convention. We cannot submit to disobedience of a lawful order of the court. We must embrace the judiciary, whether it favors us or it doesn't. We submit to this principle of democracy, separation of power, and understanding of the dynamics of it, and the nationhood that Nigeria is, that we must build one country. There's no other way to the path that we embrace to national greatness other than build one nation, one common vision for progress, prosperity of our people. That's what we must do.
So that's the thing about power. It rarely moves in straight lines. It adjusts, reframes, and sometimes whispers when you expect it to shout. Across the African continent tonight, the law has spoken, leaders have responded, and the public is left to interpret the space in between. Because in African politics, outcomes are never just outcomes. They are beginnings, warnings, or opportunities. From all of us at Second Take, do make sure your third eye remains open, because these people, they be moving shady. See you next week.